The boy played games since childhood, as he was very sick and spent a lot of time in the hospital. It was boring to just lie down, and this became an important part of his life. And this time the hero was playing a mobile game, but suddenly he was defeated and began to complain about the NPC artificial intelligence. But if you do something for a long time, you get tired of it, and one day it just becomes uninteresting to play. Neither puzzles, nor RPGs, nor first-person shooters, nothing could interest the young man. The story and lore were simple and stereotypical, the system had no depth, and there were no unique games. But suddenly he found an RPG indie game with 2D pixel graphics, which had long been unpopular. It was called Dungeon & Stone. The game was only in English, and in general the hero didn't really like such games. But it was free, so despite everything, the guy, out of boredom, decided to download and install it. There were many types and classes here, but the young man didn't have much hope for the game and didn't plan to spend much time in it, so he chose at random. He noticed that he hadn't played a vertical scrolling game in a long time and began to take his first steps in and get used to the mechanics. So, without even noticing it, the hero spent the whole day in the game, and the room began to be illuminated by the setting sun. Only by looking at his watch did the guy realize how late it was. The game seemed incredibly interesting and exciting to him, despite its graphics. Dungeon & Stone had a few mechanics that could be called either interesting or shitty, the first being that you absolutely needed an NPC ally. And the second one implies that after death, the player has to start the whole passage from the beginning, and at first, everything seemed very funny, but with each death, the guy became more and more angry, and could no longer contain his anger, and began to scream loudly, but the doctor quickly calmed him down. The hero apologized for his behavior and, despite the negative emotions, continued to play, because he was so stubborn that he decided to complete the game at any cost. Dungeon & Stone was so unpopular and a failure that there were no tutorials for it in either Korean or English, and so the young man decided that he would complete the game on his own. Time flew by quickly, and the hero continued to play and work in the civil service at the same time, despite the lack of time. He entered university, graduated, got a job, and was already working full-time. Life went on as usual. And all this time the hero continued to play Dungeon & Stone, but he could not complete it, and kept dying and starting over, dying and starting over. But then 9 long years passed, and finally the guy was close to the end he had been striving for so long. He reached the final boss room of the entire Dungeon & Stone game, and was incredibly happy about this event. He was so overwhelmed with emotion from this simple picture of a door on the screen that he couldn't hold back his voice. Filled with joy and pride, he wasn't sure that anyone had made it here. The hero shed tears of joy because he had been working towards this for 9 years, but he gathered his courage and agreed with all the pop-up notifications when entering the room. Among them was a strange window with information that he might never return, and the guy decided that it was just because it was the final boss. While waiting for the loading, the young man thought that he would hardly pass the first time, and now he needed to collect as much information about the enemy as possible. He also assumed about his features, ultimate attacks, and so on. The hero also allowed himself to dream that thanks to all his experience and preparation, he would be able to defeat the main boss the first time. The download was complete and new notifications appeared, among which was one that made the hero surprised and even scared, and it said that the training was complete. But what made him go crazy was the Korean language in the notifications, because he thought that Dungeon & Stone only had English. And he spent almost 10 years racking his brains trying to get through tons of dialogue and descriptions in English, which made him very frustrated. Suddenly, a bright light began to shine from the monitors, which blinded the hero. He did not understand what the hell was going on here. Suddenly, this light burst out from the monitors and swirled around the guy like a beam, causing hellish pain throughout his body. A moment later, the hero's body disappeared without a trace, and the rays rushed back to where they came from, into the monitors. The guy lost consciousness, but through his oblivion, he heard a voice congratulating the young fighters and saying that they would soon become real warriors, and when he opened his eyes, a crowd of savages appeared before his eyes. The hero found himself in an unimaginable situation. The darkness was illuminated everywhere, not by the usual LEDs, but by real, smoking torches. There was a crowd of wild, pumped-up barbarians standing around, wearing a variety of very primitive clothes and covered in tattoos. And some strange and no longer young, judging by his gray hair, man reads out an equally strange speech, and now he called for choosing a suitable weapon for himself. The hero was completely confused. He did not understand what kind of weapon was being talked about. He did not understand where he knew the language that the leader apparently spoke, and why the young man was here at all. The guy quickly pulled himself together and decided to sort out the situation and gather information, and the first thing he noticed, remembering the recent terrible pain, was his body. And I couldn't help but be surprised again. Rough hands, powerful muscles, tattoos, all this was extremely strange. The guy couldn't believe all this, but he couldn't think forever, because the situation continued to develop, and the leader shouted out to those who would be called to come out. Despite the complete confusion and lack of understanding of what was happening, the young man began to observe the situation because a cry was heard calling a certain third son of Vanon, Karak, and the barbarian standing in front of the young man walked forward. Standing in front of the gray-haired man, he began to quickly look around as if searching for something. It soon became clear that the young barbarian was choosing a weapon, for he picked up a double axe and raised it upward, to which the chieftain praised his choice. And with all the power of his mighty lungs he declared him a warrior, after which he shouted the next name in the same style, only now it was Fenelon's second daughter, Einar. And then a strange thought came into the hero's head. Because he remembers something like that, this is a familiar situation for him. The young fighters choose their weapons and are recognized as warriors, the boy thought, as the ceremony continued. And with the leader's words about blessing Raffonia, it was as if a city from his fantasies and memories appeared before his eyes. An incredible guess pierced the guy's head, his pupils narrowed, his breathing became intermittent, and cold sweat appeared. This is the world of the game dungeon in stone. He chose a barbarian as a starting character, and just played for this class. The hero simply couldn't comprehend how this was even possible. Heavy thoughts occupied his head. Completely focused on his thoughts, he didn't even notice how the rest of the sounds of the ceremony seemed to be muffled. But suddenly, the hero heard the barbarian standing nearby say the name of the game, which aroused serious interest in the young man. He was different from other barbarians because he had horror on his face, his eyes were darting, and he was afraid of everything. The guy realized that he was not the only one who got into the game and that this barbarian was the same player as he was. Suddenly, a threatening voice was heard very close by, asking who dared to open their mouth. Raising their heads, the two young barbarians saw the figure of the leader towering over them. He had a threatening look, and his very appearance inspired terror. The hero was feverishly thinking about how the chief had ended up here so quickly and unnoticed, but his occupation was interrupted by the chief's question, asking if it was he who had done it. The guy shouted out decisively, denying it and trying to hide his fear, excitement, and worries. The hero glanced sideways at the barbarian standing next to him, mentally blaming him for what was happening. The leader realized who was guilty and turned his terrifying gaze on him, to which the barbarian tried to apologize hesitantly. And he asked if this was all really dungeon and stone, and there was horror in his eyes, cold sweat running down his forehead. But the young barbarian's words were interrupted by the chieftain, who simply swung his fearsome axe without the slightest mercy. The hero looked in horror at the place where the head of someone as unfortunate as he had recently been, and could not move from the fear that gripped him. Despite the emotions that overwhelmed him, the guy stood straight and tried not to show anything on his face because he could become the second victim. Without taking his eyes off the hero, the chieftain reported that Kadua's son, Orm, had been captured by an evil spirit. Seemingly satisfied that the second barbarian was okay, the chief turned around and walked back, ordering everyone to forget the evil spirit's words along the way. The ceremony continued, and the hero thought hard and realized several things, namely that people like him are called evil spirits. If someone finds out about them, they kill them, and that his head could be lying on the ground. The following names of the barbarians were heard, and the guy realized that he had one small problem. He didn't know his new name. There was no character screen, but the hero was able to figure out what to do. He would just wait 2 seconds after each name and then go. Of course, it could be the name of another evil spirit, but he would have to take a risk with that. After some tense anticipation, the next name was called Jandel's son, Björn. The hero quickly glanced at the crowd of barbarians, but none of them moved, which meant it was time to take a risk. 2 seconds passed, but no one came out, and if so, it was time to cast aside fear and doubt and go to the merciless leader. Gathering all his will into a fist and not showing a single emotion on his face, the hero confidently stepped towards fate, hoping that this was truly his name. The guy crossed the distance between him and the leader and stopped. Now he would decide whether to live or die. The man's menacing eyes, as if glowing with a golden color, carefully examined the guy in front of him, eventually meeting his gaze. The hero looked firmly, without showing a single emotion. This continued for some time until the leader decided something for himself. He smiled, turned to the young warrior, and with a wave of his hand ordered him to choose a weapon for himself. The hero expressed his emotions with a small grin and thought about the fact that Jandel's son, Bjorn, was now his name. But now the guy was faced with a second important decision, so he tried to calm down and pull himself together. Bjorn looked at the racks of weapons, thinking along the way that barbarians had no talent for magic, but they had outstanding physical abilities. He's going to pick something that will help him as a beginner, so the weapon he chose is this. The shield, and the boy was sure that this was the best choice. The cry of the chieftain sounded, declaring Bjorn a warrior. Meanwhile, the guy's computer continued to work in the house, but not as usual, and by itself. It acquired the status of Björn Yandel. The hero went into recollections of how, during his first game as a barbarian, he chose a two-handed sword because it looked cool. But he died too much and too often, and could do almost nothing to the monsters he fought against. He couldn't figure out how to play a barbarian at all and increase his survivability because he died over and over again. Then he tried out a variety of weapons that would be suitable for a barbarian. These were double axes, huge hammers, a flail, and many others. It was a very unstable build, because every fight was like the last, and he barely survived, leaving the fight on his last breath. But one day, while browsing through the wares in a gun shop, he noticed a simple shield and an interesting idea came to his mind. And the barbarian should definitely be a damage dealer, because they are tenacious and strong, and although dwarves are better suited as tanks, his class also has everything needed for this role. The hero didn't like this fighting style because it required training, but he didn't want to waste time, so he decided to try it. And surprisingly, with such a strange build as a barbarian with a shield, the guy managed to fully implement this playstyle in a serious fight with one of the bosses, a basilisk, and defeat him. And although in reality the graphics and dry lines of what was happening on the screen were not at all impressive, in the player's head all this turned into an epic battle with a huge monster. The player realized that this was complete MBA, but in reality he summed up his thoughts and memories by saying that this was the most rational decision he could make now, and he would not regret it. Björn was brought out of his thoughts by the loud voice of the chieftain, who ordered the gates to be opened, which the adult barbarians immediately began to obey. Today, young fighters who are going through the coming-of-age ceremony are sent to the labyrinth, and among them is the hero himself. Their destination was just beyond the gates, in the city of Raffonia, and the leader ordered the warriors to go forward, for in this city, their fate would be determined. After these words, the crowd of barbarians ran in disorganization through the gate, and with them ran the son of Jandel. The hero decided to run with them for now so as not to stand out, although he was not sure if they even knew where to run. After running around the city for some time, the barbarian who ran first reported that they were lost. At this, the rest of the crowd began to resent, and it was necessary to choose a new leader, and Bjorn thought to himself that they were no better than this leader. To which the ashamed leader lowered his shoulders calmed everyone down and was about to say that he was handing over his position. But in the middle of his speech, he was interrupted by a barbarian girl. And she said that she would be the leader, to which the others supported her, and shouted the name of Einar, the second daughter of Fenelon, and also that she was wise. The hero remembered her name and they continued their search, but very soon the girl reported that she was lost. The barbarians were outraged and began to quarrel with each other for the right to the place of the new leader, and Bjorn thought that at this rate they would never reach the labyrinth. But he did not want to attract attention and lead them himself. Then the hero turned to the former leader girl, Einar, to which she decided that he had come to condemn her. But Jandel's son explained that he wanted to tell her how to get to the labyrinth, to which the surprised girl asked how to achieve this. In response, Bjorn pointed his index finger at the group of adventurers and explained that they simply had to follow them. The adventurers looked at the group of barbarians with disdain and mocked them, and they were also sure that they would not find the way. The pair of barbarians paid no attention to this, and Einar exclaimed that she would try to do just that. The girl exclaimed that she had found the way to the labyrinth, to which the naive barbarians immediately believed and returned her role as leader, and also began to praise her wisdom, while the hero wondered if they were really that brainless. Soon, following Bjorn's advice, the group actually reached the entrance to the labyrinth, and a huge crowd of various intelligent beings had already gathered there. The hero was overcome with doubts about the advisability of sending him to the labyrinth, because in this chaos no one would notice his disappearance, and he himself had been an ordinary person all his life. He had never even fought with anyone in his entire life, and would he be able to defeat the monsters? Would he not find another way to pay Raffonia's taxes? Taxes are one of the strange systems of Dungeon and Stone, the essence of which is that upon reaching 20 years of age, each resident must pay money to the state, but the peculiarity is that if you do not pay, you will be executed. There are several ways to earn money. The first is by fighting various monsters in the labyrinth. The second is to go to work in the most ordinary positions, for example in bars or somewhere else, but the hero will have certain problems with this. He is a barbarian, and in this world, barbarians are not preferred for employment and are generally viewed extremely negatively. Because of this limitation, at the beginning of the game, the barbarian, unlike other classes, immediately receives a weapon. If not for this, Bjorn would not have to fight monsters. The entrance to the labyrinth is closing soon, and you need to think faster, because you can only get inside once a month, and if you don't go now, you'll have to survive here for another month, which, given the difficulties with earning money, will be difficult. Even if he survives this month, he will be in terrible condition, so he needs to leave right now, but his legs won't budge, because this is not a game, and his life is at stake. Suddenly the same Einar turned to Bjorn. The guy greeted her, but made a mistake in calling her the third daughter. She corrected him, saying that she was the second, and said that the others had already entered, and they needed to hurry. The last adventurers, except for a couple of barbarians, were already running through the portal, and the man next to him said that it would close in 5 minutes, while the guy noticed that the passage was getting smaller. Bjorn told Einar to go ahead, and he followed her, but she stopped to thank him for his help. The girl also wanted to ask what she needed to do to become as wise as he was, because she had never seen such wise barbarians and wanted to become the same. Bjorn thought that she would have to be reborn for this, but decided to give a vague answer and said that before doing something, you need to think first. In response, Einar said that if she returned from the labyrinth, she would thank him, but the hero seized on this reservation and realized that, unlike in the game, barbarians are also people and can be afraid of death. Putting on a serious face, Bjorn asked the girl if she was afraid of death, to which he received a rhetorical question about whether this was abnormal. Einar immediately continued that she was afraid, but she was born a warrior and would die if she did not fight, and the hero realized that he was in the same situation and would have to fight to live. The girl decided to say goodbye with words about how they needed to survive and meet again, and the guy thought that this is why barbarians learn to overcome their fear, and they are incredible. He took his shield in his hands and began to gather his courage, and also mentally shouted that he was now also a barbarian. A warning sounded that there was 1 minute left before the labyrinth closed, and the hero immediately took off at an impressive speed. Bjorn is afraid, but he has no other choice. He has not only the body of a barbarian, but also the mind of a dungeon and stone player who has raised thousands of characters, and with this knowledge he will definitely survive, he thought, running into the labyrinth. Having run into the ever-shrinking passage, the hero found himself in a place completely devoid of light and did not understand where he was at all. Standing in the darkness, Bjorn reflected that he was an expert in the world of dungeon and stone, and he came to this conclusion for a simple reason. Because the body of a mighty barbarian was combined into it, with his strength, durability, and so on, he has a good advantage, and knowledge of 9 whole years of playing for different classes and builds, which gives simply a huge amount of information. Bjorn tried to make out at least something in the pitch darkness. He hoped that his eyes would soon get used to it, and at least something would be visible. But no. In the game, on the first level, in the crystal cave, there were crystals on the walls that gave off enough light that torches were not needed. Suddenly the hero remembered that on the first level there was a location with no light called the Dark Region. But in the game, this is not the starting location. But since this is the real world, then nothing can be guaranteed. And even in such places, you can end up at the very beginning. In the meantime, you can finally try to call up the characteristics window or something similar, which is what Bjorn did, starting to pronounce various terms, from inventory to daily log. But, as expected, nothing came of it, which did not stop the hero from beginning to resent the injustice of life. There was no point in standing, the barbarian decided, and began to move, but due to the darkness, progress was extremely slow. And just as Jandella's son began to think that there might be traps here, a sharp pain pierced his leg, and he could not hold back a scream. But the next moment, Bjorn began to hold back his moans, and tried to calm his emotions and ignore the pain. Goblin, this is a monster that uses traps on the first level, and it may be nearby. After these thoughts, the hero began to carefully look and listen into the darkness. He could have gone somewhere, and the barbarian would have been lucky, but such thoughts are extremely dangerous, and if he is not sure of the situation, then he needs to assume the worst possible outcome. If his trap is here, then its owner is nearby, and if he hears my scream and sees that I am caught in the trap, he will wait until I weaken from blood loss. Since this is the situation, then you need to do what is necessary, Bjorn thought, and began to remove the trap from his leg. He also noticed that it was smeared with a paralyzing poison, and if he had been given normal boots and not sandals, then everything would have been easier. But in any case, it's useless to think about it now. You need to quickly get out of the trap and be ready for battle. Your leg is numb. Because of the paralyzing poison, it's not even scary. The hero began to aggressively shout at the goblin to come out, because he didn't want to leave the vile creature behind him. But everything was quiet. Suddenly the goblin really was gone. But even if he behaved like an idiot, he would be an idiot who survived, Bjorn thought, and said into the darkness to stand still, and he himself would leave. His mind was clouded by the loss of blood, but the barbarian continued walking, when suddenly he heard someone else's footsteps. Although the hero now knows that the goblin is here, he still can't see anything, and he decides to try running. After running a bit, Bjorn suddenly stopped and turned around. The goblin's steps also died down. He was pursuing, but keeping his distance. In the pitch darkness, the goblin's vile laughter was heard. He waits for the victim to bleed to death and rejoices at the imminent dinner, not even hiding his voice. Then Jandel's son decided to pretend that he was completely weak and fell on the cold floor of the labyrinth, waiting for the goblin. The goblin came a little closer and began to carefully examine his victim and, as he thought, soon food. But the goblin was careful and smart enough to check if the victim was alive by throwing a pebble at the head. The monster's intelligence surprised Bjorn quite a bit, and he even thought that he was definitely smarter than the barbarians, while the object of his thoughts continued to throw pebbles. The goblin began to approach the victim, when unexpectedly for the hunter, he himself became the prey. Bjorn tried to throw his fist straight at the green-skinned creature's face, but missed, which even amused the monster a little. But the next moment, the hero felt as if his body began to move on its own, which was completely unexpected. This body is very different from his past. Instincts are highly developed in it, and the hero could even feel how his opponent moves. These thoughts went in parallel with how the goblin received blow after blow. With a loud, wild growl, the barbarian beat the already lying monster, who could no longer resist. How could the puny green-skinned one compete with the mighty barbarian? And now the hour of the final blow had come. Bjorn was not going to spare the monster, because what was the point? Even if it had intelligence, it was not even close to human. Besides, it would not spare the barbarian himself. A short time after death, the monster's body began to evaporate just as it happened in the game. In place of the corpse, there was only a small red object. It was the currency used in the world of dungeon and stone. To be more specific, it was a 9th-class magic crystal. His price is just a piece of bread, and for this Bjorn Yandel went through such a dangerous situation. This is a place where labyrinths and monsters exist that, after death, leave items and disappear. And outside the city, there are other places familiar to the guy from the game, where life goes on as usual and other races coexist. This is definitely the game world that the hero knows about, but he can never consider this reality a game, and with these thoughts, the barbarian continued to move through the labyrinth. The barbarian has been crawling in complete darkness for a long time now, but the bleeding still refuses to stop. The rejection of the human method of movement begins to bear fruit, because this way the guy does not use his injured leg, and he moves faster than you might think. And the most important advantage is that it is now impossible to step into a trap, and Bjorn is ready to endure inconvenience for the sake of survival. Continuing to move, the hero thought that bleeding was very dangerous, and he couldn't stop because he needed to find someone who would help him with the wound. In such a dangerous situation, Bjorn remembered a guy like him, who was killed by the leader at the very beginning, and began to wonder if he died or woke up in his world. And he also realized that it is in such cases that faith helps. It seemed to the hero that he was coping, because light was already visible in the distance. After all, the entrance to the first floor should not be covered in darkness. The guy is sure that someone will help him there. Suddenly, Bjorn saw himself, but different. It seems that the loss of blood and the stressful situation itself are already causing hallucinations. The figment of the imagination began to tell that no one would save the miserable dying barbarian, because he was not a beautiful girl or an intelligent man, but a savage that no one needed. Jandel's son felt his personality splitting and then joining, and then becoming silent again, and he was definitely going crazy. Despite his condition and the constant mockery of his own mind, Bjorn continued to crawl, and soon it brought results. He finally got out of the pitch darkness into the light. Almost immediately, the young warrior noticed a group of adventurers, and one of its members noticed the dying man himself. He turned to what appeared to be the leader of the Otrada, Drouse, and pointed to a wounded barbarian slightly off to the side of their squad's path. The blonde walked up to Bjorn and leaned over him, thinking out loud that he looked like a newbie, to which the guy mentally resented the fact that he was looking at him here instead of helping. Drouse continued his thoughts and said that it was suspicious, because this newcomer had arrived here before them, and Jandel's son could no longer even speak from weakness. The blonde grinned and asked the squad's priestess, Ursina, if she could heal this man, to which the barbarian himself could only be surprised that their squad had such a useful girl. Bjorn had already managed to rejoice at his salvation when the woman destroyed his hopes with her cold refusal. Then he asked the adventurer, Patsran, who had noticed the barbarian, if he could give him his potion, to which he pointed out the value of the potion, and the blonde added that he would pay for it later. Besides, there were quite a few of them. Having received what he wanted, the leader began to uncork the bottle and explain that this was not divine power, so it would hurt a little. After the potion hit the wound, Björn's body was pierced by such intense pain that it felt like his body itself was melting. After some time, the pain went away, and the wound on his leg was gone, the weakness almost receded, and the hero began to rise from the floor. As soon as Björn recovered, Draus began to ask about how the newcomer got here before their group, and also whether there was a secret passage, to which the barbarian explained how everything happened. The blonde began to think out loud about the fact that once every few hundred years, due to spatial instability, there is a chance to end up in the dark region. Bjorn began to rise from the ground as the adventurers passed by, and Draus informed him that he should not worry about the price of the potion. As the barbarian watched the group move away, he reflected that time in the labyrinth was extremely valuable, and it was a miracle that they had spent so much time on it. Björn should have been glad that he had survived, but he hated feeling sorry for himself. Meanwhile, the group continued on their way, and its members talked about the unexpected meeting, in particular arguing about his luck or bad luck, because on the one hand he got into an unpleasant situation, and on the other, he met them. The archer noted that his luck was to meet Draus, and not him, Patsran, because he was sorry to even give his potion. To this, the adventurer replied that there were many such worthless ones, and did not the priestess agree with him? To this, the archer said that if it were not for the rules of the temple, the barbarian could have been cured without any problems. Continuing the argument, pointing out the kindness of Draus, because he gave the dying man the opportunity to pay for help with information, and barbarians do not like to accept help from others, they also noticed that the bloody trail had been going on for a long time. The priestess noted that it was convenient to have a guide, who was the blonde man, to which the archer noted that he had memorized the map of the entire first level, which was an extreme rarity. But when the group finally reached their destination, they noticed that they were the first to arrive, and Draus came closer. And he activated the portal that leads to the second level of the labyrinth, and the adventurers began to move to the next location. But the archer made everyone pay attention to the sandals of their recent acquaintance and the trap nearby. The magician illuminated the cave, and everyone saw that the bloody trail stretched all the way from here, which surprised everyone, because they had lost him. The magician asked Draus how long it was to walk from here to the place where they met the barbarian, to which he received the answer that it was about 15 kilometers if you didn't take a shortcut. Patsran, having learned that he had crawled for so long in pitch darkness, wondered whether he could repeat it. He also remembered that the barbarian had then pulled his magic crystal towards them, which he carried with him all the time, no matter what. He simply had nothing more to thank them with, and after these thoughts he informed the group that he took back all his unflattering words about this guy. He realized that people like this barbarian never give in, no matter what, and never escape from problems through death. After his recovery, Bjorn continued to encounter green-skinned goblins in fairly large numbers. The first time, the barbarian was in pitch darkness and was also nervous, but now these monsters pose practically no threat. The traps are set randomly and not even camouflaged in any way, making it almost impossible to get caught. Their attack directions and ambush sites are extremely predictable, and they cannot pose a serious threat. But a new problem has appeared, and it is extremely simple. It is hunger, because enough time has passed, and the energy has gone to recovery and physical activity. Suddenly I remembered that they were given provisions at the very beginning, but while crawling the bag got damaged and a fair amount of food was lost. There was only enough for 2 days left from the 7-day ration, which meant he would have to economize, Björn thought, eating the bread, which seemed quite tasty to him. Only the first problem, the need for food, was more or less solved, as I wanted to drink, but this will be more difficult. Dungeon and Stone only had a hunger system, which worked in the labyrinth, and it had no information about water. But this is not a game, but the real world, and since they were not given water to take with them, it means that there must be natural springs somewhere, and the hero went in search of them. After some time, Björn heard the sound of water and went there, where he met a lonely adventurer resting. It was the first time he had met anyone outside of that blonde guy's group, but in the labyrinth there was an unspoken rule not to interact with others unless absolutely necessary. Having quenched his thirst, Björn decided to count the crystals he had obtained from the goblins, of which there were 44, which turned out to be quite a good haul for him. And now, the third problem has arrived, also connected with the needs of the body, namely, the need for sleep. And there are two ways to rest in the labyrinth. The first is to simply go to bed and hope for luck. The second is to find people who can protect you in your sleep. In other words, temporarily unite with someone. But here too the hero was in for a failure, because some were openly afraid of the barbarian covered in blood, some did not trust him, and some simply did not like people like him. This whole situation was extremely irritating to Björn, but he couldn't do anything about it, and he just wanted to sleep. But suddenly, some lonely adventurer approached him with an offer to become night companions, which at first angered Björn, but he explained that he had nothing reprehensible in mind. The barbarian agreed with the proposal, and also remembered that a night companion is an in-game term, although in real life it sounds strange. After that they introduced themselves to each other. The new acquaintance was called Hans. The adventurer said that it was pointless to look for another comrade, and that they would spend that night just the two of them, which made Björn tense up because of the ambiguity of the phrase and the manner of speech of his new acquaintance. They played rock, paper, scissors to see who would be on duty first, and the barbarian lost, which didn't surprise him, since his luck had clearly deserted him lately. Hans handed Björn a mechanical watch and told him how to know when to wake him up. He clearly didn't have the best opinion of his friend's intelligence. Looking at the obviously expensive device, the hero thought that in the future he would certainly have a chance to use the prejudice about the stupidity of barbarians to his advantage. Looking at the sleeping Hans, the warrior wondered if all adventurers behaved so carelessly, and whether he would lend him his sleeping bag. And so when the right time came, Björn woke up his temporary comrade so that he could take up his post. Hans replied that it was now the barbarian's turn to sleep, and then he realized that he wouldn't be able to sleep because he didn't trust his friend at all. The hero decided to just pretend to be asleep, simulating a loud snore, but in reality he listened attentively to the actions of his temporary comrade. But during the entire dream, Hans did nothing, despite all of Björn's expectations and suspicions. Looking at the carefree sleeping man, the barbarian doubted whether it was all justified, or whether he was just winding himself up in vain. So, while thinking, the hero began to feel sleepy, because recently he had had very intense adventures, an injury, and the very fact of getting into this world. Björn was brought out of his sleep by a sharp cry of his name. It was Hans. After all, 2 hours had already passed, and now it was his turn to be on duty again, and he did not argue with his night companion since nothing had happened and sent him to sleep. And although intuition told me not to trust this man, the facts said otherwise. Because he was the first to turn to him when the barbarian was in a difficult situation, he didn't scold him for his mistake, so he could sleep. But suddenly Björn woke up and saw Hans hanging over him with his huge hammer, who was surprised at his light sleep and said that he should sleep a little longer. The next moment, the adventurer's weapon rushed straight at the barbarian's head with impressive speed. But not enough, because Björn had good enough speed and reaction to dodge and jump away from the opponent. Hans clearly did not expect such agility from the barbarian, and now he was confused and did not know what to do next. Björn was furious about the attempted murder, and Hans began to try to justify himself, which only made the big guy even more angry because he thought his people were so stupid. Quickly closing in on the enemy, the barbarian delivered a blow similar to an uppercut, but with his metal shield right at the man's chin. Hans' jaw was strong enough to continue his excuses. He tried to stop Björn, saying that he had an explanation. The hero didn't even listen to him. He was thinking that, unlike the goblin, he didn't die from the first blow, which meant that he needed to hit again. The barbarian immediately put his thoughts into action, delivering a direct attack with his shield right into Hans's face, likely knocking out a couple of his teeth. He flew away from the force of the blow, but before he could recover, the terrifying figure of Björn appeared in front of him, the mere sight of which made him lose all will to fight. Hans began to beg for mercy, but the hero was not concerned with these screams. He was interested in the reasons for this vile attack in his sleep. The man began to explain that he needed magic crystals, and the hero could not believe that they tried to kill him for this. Seeing the distrust in Björn's eyes, Hans continued that he also wanted to take the shield, since the barbarian's equipment was considered to be of very high quality and was quite expensive. The hero decided that this man was hiding something else, and decided to loosen his tongue by kicking him in the head. Putting his foot on Hans's body, Björn threatened that this was the last chance to tell the truth, but he decided that this was not all, because in the world of Dungeon and Stone, killing an adventurer is a serious crime. Then the would-be assassin confessed that he also needed his heart, the barbarian's heart. They sell for a good price, and he heard that it was an ingredient for some new spell. Then Björn realized that for this man he was like a goblin, just a very difficult but also valuable prey. The barbarian also learned that Hans had not attacked the first time only because he also wanted to sleep, and the former knight companion asked that since he had told everything, would they forgive him. At first there was a few seconds of silence, and then Björn explained that he would probably meet more people like him later, and he was not going to forgive anyone. These were the last words that this man heard. 2 days had passed since entering the game. Despite his first kill, the hero tried to find some positives. Among them was that he received new equipment. These were shoulder pads, a backpack, a hammer, and leather boots. In his backpack he now carried a flask of water, a compass, that same watch, bandages, and potions, and he got all of this by killing a man, which did not improve his mood, but he himself was to blame. With the new weapons, it became much easier to kill goblins, and during the fight, the instincts of the body took over, which on the one hand felt like being in someone else's body. On the other hand, it made it easier to fight. It's already the second day of the labyrinth's life, so the goblins began to appear in pairs, but the hero also became stronger thanks to equipment and some experience. Also, the young warrior's progress became much faster than before, which could not but please. But there was one serious problem among this news, because he had not slept for a long time, and this threatened significant problems, and remembering the previous experience of searching for a comrade, the hero decided to sleep alone. But as soon as Björn began to fall asleep, these green-skinned people appeared, which irritated him greatly, as a result of which they lost their lives. Then the barbarian tried to kill all the goblins in the area, hoping that they would not appear again, and fell asleep. He was awakened by a sharp pain in his chest, and opening his eyes he saw a monster in front of him who plunged a dagger straight into his body. But the green-skinned man did not rejoice for long, because he received a fist in the face and died instantly. His friend, seeing the fate of his comrade, hastened to flee, and the barbarian did not even have the strength to pursue the fugitive. Reflecting on the fact that due to overwork, he did not notice the danger at all, the hero decided to use a healing potion, which brought even more suffering than the injury itself. It's been 14 hours since the meeting with Hans. At this time, the adventurers begin to look for companions for the night, which Björn decided to do, but now he decided to look for a fellow barbarian, because only he can be trusted. This time, other groups of adventurers also invited him to join their company, and at first, the hero, due to exhaustion, did not understand why. He refused everyone and explained that he was looking for a relative, and he also understood the reason for such hospitality, simply and trivially. With new equipment he looks not like a tramp without one sandal, but like a completely reliable comrade. One of the people I met explained that it would be difficult to find a barbarian on the first level of the labyrinth, because all of them, 3 to 4 months after the ceremony, go to the second or higher levels, and it is difficult to meet young ones. Then the hero decided that since he couldn't find his relatives, he would look for representatives of other races. For example, elves who kept their promises, or dwarves who were as lively as he was, but not people. They wouldn't attack other adventurers, blinded by the thirst for profit, Björn thought, and after an hour of searching, he was lucky enough to find the elf sitting right on the floor of the cave, with a bow and quiver lying nearby. The barbarian asked the elf if she was alone, to which he received a tense silence, She was clearly afraid of the big guy who had suddenly appeared. Björn also noticed that the girl was wounded in the stomach, and it did not look like the damage was caused by goblins, so he asked if a human did it. The elf suddenly fell to her knees and asked for mercy, which greatly stunned the hero. Her eyes began to water, and she continued to beg for him to let her go, and also said that she had a little brother at home. Björn just stood there the whole time, thinking that in the game all the elves were very cold and very different from this representative. In order to calm the elf down, the hero tried to smile kindly, which clearly didn't work out, and on the contrary, he scared her even more, and even added that he didn't plan to kill her, as if an even worse fate awaited her. The next moment, the girl burst into tears and began to say that she knew that the warrior opposite her was a barbarian, but he did not have to kill her. At this sight, the hero could only marvel at the bad reputation his fellow humans had, and he could only guess how they had earned it. Bjorn decided to throw the elf some bandages and some herbs that he didn't know, but the pointy-eared one recognized them. They were the healing leaves of Liko. When the girl asked why he was giving it to her, he replied that there did not necessarily have to be a reason for helping, although in fact he wanted to make as positive an impression as possible. When the elf finished bandaging the wounds, the couple decided to introduce themselves to each other. The possible friend's name was Erwin. Sitting down opposite, Björn asked the reason for her fear of him, to which she simply replied that it was because she was an elf, and he was a barbarian. And she explained in detail that their races had fought with each other about 10 years ago, which made the hero surprised and made him think about how much time had passed since the situation that was presented in the game. But then Erwin said that enough time had passed, and now there was peace between them, and she did not hate his people, and also did not want to fight with them. In response, Björn said that he also held no grudge, which made the elf happy, and then asked her if she would like to be his companion for the night. Erwin was wary of the barbarian, but remembering that people like him value their military honor, she asked him to swear by it that he would not harm her, and seeing the displeasure on the big guy's face, she assured him that she would swear by her tribe. Bjorn agreed with this, but decided to first deal with the fact that the girl constantly calls him Mr., which makes him feel old, and once again reminded him of his name. When this question was decided, the barbarian and the elf began to pronounce mutual oaths, and the full name of the pointy-eared one turned out to be Erwin Fornaci de Tercia. Björn decided that he would sleep first, and gave the girl the watch that he had gotten during his last attempt to spend the night. Lying in the sleeping bag that used to belong to Hans, the hero thought that he would never have thought that it would be so difficult to get the opportunity to sleep, and also that he needed to pretend to sleep a little. But he didn't succeed, and soon Erwin woke him up, because 2 hours had already passed, and he decided that it was the power of the pillow and the backpack as a pillow. And he decided to let the elf use these things for sleeping, because this way she would also certainly not be able to pretend and would fall asleep, and she, it seems, was no less tired than he was. This made Erwin extremely happy. She could not even imagine that such a barbarian as Björn would take care of her. As soon as the elf laid her head on the backpack, she immediately fell asleep, and the hero began to guard the sleep of his night companion. Bored, Björn sank into his thoughts. Memories of his past life began to penetrate his head, and as a result of his reflections, he came to the conclusion that even if he could return, there was nothing to do there anyway. The barbarian and the elf swapped places a few more times, and soon it would be time to go their own way. But looking at the sleeping Erwin, the hero thought that he could unite with her in a group, but would have to share the crystals. Suddenly, his thoughts were interrupted by a pair of adventurers who came out from around the corner of the cave, preventing him from seeing them in advance. As they approached, Bjorn immediately took a fighting stance, and one of the unexpected guests asked about his relationship with the elf. The barbarian replied that they were companions for the night. The adventurer asked how much time was left until the end of their cooperation, to which the hero replied that he was not obliged to answer and looked at them coldly. A very menacing appearance and chilling gaze frightened a couple of uninvited guests, and also, it must be admitted, surprised It is not often that people like him stand up for elves. Having assessed their chances of winning the battle with the mighty barbarian as negative, the adventurers hastened to move away. Björn had a bad feeling, and based on their interest and his intuition, he assumed that they needed Erwin, so he started to wake her up, but she, like a child, asked for 5 more minutes. The hero noticed that she was actually just pretending to be asleep, which was evident from the fact that she was holding the blanket near her face. Grabbing the elf by the shoulders and lifting her up, Björn asked the reason for her behavior, to which she put her hands up in a defensive gesture. Erwin replied that if she stood up, the guy would leave her alone, and the hero understood the situation because they were just temporary allies, nothing more. And as soon as the elf opens her eyes, the oath will end, the barbarian continued to think, getting ready for his further journey. He also asked about what connects her with those 2 recent guests. She answered that nothing. But Bjorn noticed that they knew her from somewhere, and Erwin had to admit that they were from the same clan as the people who had wounded her. This could be seen from the symbol on their clothes. They were from the Crystal Union. The hero began to think that this promised big problems, because there was a whole group of them. But looking at the worried girl, he could not leave her alone. Bjorn told her to get ready and that they were leaving, and the delighted elf asked if he would help, but the guy replied that first they needed to listen to her story. Erwin said that she was with their squad as companions for the night, but at night she felt something and woke up, and upon awakening she saw a man approaching her. Continuing to run away from the place where they spent the night, the girl said that only later she found out that he was the director of their clan, which operates on the first level of the labyrinth, and since then she has been persecuted. They are helped to coordinate their actions in her search by stone transmitters, magical devices that allow them to communicate at a distance of up to 300 meters, if they are synchronized. The hero began to think hard. They are the equivalent of walkie-talkies. They are a bunch of people. There is nowhere to run. If he abandons Erwin, she will die. Björn asks why they continue to pursue her if she has done nothing significant, perhaps to silence her, to which the girl hesitantly replies that there is a compelling reason. And feeling awkward, she began to tell that when she ran away, she threw her knife somewhere, and that this is what happened, and she fell silent. And after a pause, she continued to talk about how he had ended up in a so-called bad place. At this news, an unpleasant guess appeared in the barbarian's head, and the same unpleasant emotions appeared on his face. Smiling awkwardly, Erwin ends the story by saying that she heard that the director was so injured that even potions couldn't help him return everything to how it was. But after a few seconds, the emotions left her face, and she reported that they were being followed, and the distance was 150 meters. Looking out of the corner of his eye at Erwin, the hero thought about how she heard this from a very impressive distance, and also noticed the opening of her wound, and she was not complaining. Although they have sped up, the elf reports that the distance is still the same 150 meters, which means they cannot break away, and during this time the pursuer has probably informed his people about the situation. The only way out is to destroy them, but then there will be no way back. Is it worth risking for the sake of a companion, because he is not the target? While the hero decided to gather more information before making a decision, so he asked what Erwin was good at, and she replied that she was good at washing and cleaning, although her cooking was not so good. When asked if Björn meant battle, the elf replied that she was good at archery, which was understandable, but she also had mastered the magic of the spirits of the element of fire. When asked whether the girl had killed anyone, the answer was negative, but she tensely assured that she was quite capable of doing so. The hero had made up his mind, so he asked if Erwin would become his ally until he left the labyrinth, on the condition that she would only get 10% of the loot, to which he agreed. When the distance was clarified, the answer came back, 100 meters, which means that the pursuers are faster, so something needs to be changed, and Björn said that they are changing direction and ordered the girl to call the spirit. The fiery spirit illuminated their path to where the hero did not expect to return so quickly, to the dark region, and as soon as they had gone deep enough there, An order was given to cancel the summoning, after which they were left in the darkness. The pursuer had his own source of light, which left him in plain sight, but he could no longer see those he was pursuing, so Erwin gave a short order to shoot. A moment later, an arrow, torn off the bowstring at great speed, pierced the enemy's head and got stuck in it. No one can live with such injuries. The barbarian tried to cheer up the elf after the first kill. Coming closer, Björn picked up the stone transmitter, after which he began to listen to the negotiations of the opponents, from which he learned that in connection with the loss of the man they had killed, everyone was ordered to gather in the goblin district. The barbarian had hoped for a decent haul, but received only a bag of crystals, 2 knives, and 1 potion from his belt. And also, plus the leather armor that Erwin took for herself, because it's better than what she had before. When Björn asked how to use these stone transmitters, the elf replied that there should be a button on the side. Soon a voice was heard from the magic object, telling that one of them had been killed by a barbarian and a pointy-eared one, and a reward of 1,000 gold had been announced for the latter. This news did not please Erwin at all. Rather, on the contrary, it caused feelings of fear and uncertainty. Björn, however, did not lose his head, ordering the spirit of fire to be summoned, because they would be moving through the darkness to go to the 2nd floor, which surprised his companion. Erwin hastened to clarify that the level they are at now and the next one are fundamentally different. The barbarian explained that they would succeed, because they were a great couple, and continued mentally in game terms, a tank melee and a damage-dealing archer. Besides, in any case, it would not be possible to earn much here. But Erwin doubted it because this was their first trip to the labyrinth, and she made a comparison that they were running from goblins to end up in an orc's lair. But the conversations coming from the stone transmitter about what the clan fighters would do to the elf if she was captured made the girl decide that it would be better to go to the 2nd floor than to stay here. While moving through the dark region, or alternatively known as the goblin lair, the pair talked about how to get to the 2nd level, and Björn told them that on the way north, they would definitely come someday. After all, based on his knowledge, the dungeon is designed in such a way that by continuing to walk into the darkness, you will reach the portal in any case. Soon a goblin trap appeared on the couple's path, which Erwin immediately noticed thanks to her excellent eyesight. Based on the fact that they encountered the trap quite late, Björn decided that he was unlucky to encounter it at the very beginning, and while the hero was lamenting his failure, his companion said that she would disarm the trap. The barbarian called out to her and told her not to use the fire spirit for this purpose, to which the elf agreed with an uncertain look, inwardly surprised at how he knew about her plan. As soon as the girl came closer, those who had set the trap jumped out of ambush. The monsters decided that she would be an easy target. But they were wrong, and a moment later an arrow pierced the head of one of the greenskins, causing him instant death. The 2nd goblin tried to strike with his claws, paying almost no attention to the death of his kinsman. But the attack was unsuccessful. The elf turned out to be too fast and agile, and before the monster had time to understand what was happening, his, as he thought, victim was already behind him, with a drawn bowstring. A moment later, Erwin was already relaxing, and the bodies of the goblins evaporated around her, leaving behind their prey. The elf asked the barbarian if she had done well, to which she received well-deserved praise, which made her seem to glow with joy. Erwin handed over 2 magic crystals to Björn, after which she said with shining eyes that at this rate she too could earn something. From the stone transmitter came information about the update of data regarding the elf. Now the reward had increased to 2,000, and alive or dead, and the barbarian tried to console his companion. Suddenly, Erwin noticed a new danger in the darkness ahead, ghouls, which surprised the hero, because according to his information, such monsters should live in the south, not the north. The meeting made the guy think about the strange experience system in Dungeon and Stone, which consisted in the fact that EXP is given only when a representative of a new species is defeated, and there is no reward for a repeat kill. After closing the distance, the ghouls turned their ugly heads towards the living, and in their eyes one could see only hunger and no glimmer of reason. These monsters are faster and stronger than goblins, but they are still only rank 9 monsters, so they don't pose much of a threat. Plus, he's not fighting alone now, which makes the battle even easier when you have a comrade covering you. The pair walked north until their 3rd day ended, and soon they came across a long trail of blood and a piece of bread. At first, Björn had an unpleasant guess that he did not want to believe, but soon it was confirmed, because they found the very same trap, next to which lay one sandal. And very close by there was an already open portal. Remembering what the hero went through when he could have simply crawled back a dozen meters, he was overwhelmed with emotions. Soon, all other feelings were driven out by the barbarian's rage, and Bjorn gave vent to it by hitting the floor, which frightened his companion. The girl took the guy's anger personally, so she asked what she did wrong, and moisture began to gather in the corners of her eyes. But the hero calmed her down, saying that it was not because of her. Erwin then put all the factors together in her head, including the bloody trail, the pieces of bread, the sandal, and her companion's reaction. And she said in a mournful voice that he had been through so much, which made the barbarian wonder if she had really guessed what had happened. But it soon became clear that Erwin had come to the wrong conclusions. She thought that the hero had lost a precious comrade here, and uttered a phrase about the certainty that he had gone to paradise. Having gathered their courage, the pair of the elf archer and the barbarian tank went through the portal straight to the 2nd level, which is called the Goblin Forest. The next moment they were transported to a new area, but no one could have expected that they would appear not on solid ground, but above it. Upon landing, the hero noticed that he felt as if he had been chewed and spat out by a giant frog. Erwin also said that she was surprised herself, because she had never heard of such a thing before and her friends had not told her about it. While scouting the area, Björn came to the conclusion that the lighting from the stars was so-so, but there was no point in waiting for dawn because they were in the labyrinth, and also decided that in case of a threat, they could return to the 1st floor. Erwin asked if this was really the 2nd floor, since she had never heard of this forest, to which the hero explained that from the 1st level you can go through different portals and end up in other locations. And he continued, besides the Goblin Forest, there is also the Beast's Lair, the lands of the dead, and the dark rocky mountains, and when his companion asked about their next steps, the barbarian asked if she knew how to get back. When told that they would simply be thrown out when the labyrinth closed, Björn confirmed, but added that the 1st level would close in 168 hours, and the 2nd in 240. And most likely the Crystal Union will not go to this floor, so they will wait until the 1st one is about to close, and will be transferred there through their portal, and then they will be spat out into the outside world. But the hero decided not to sit around doing nothing all this time, and the couple set off to explore the surrounding area. Erwin, walking through the forest, felt nostalgic, and also reported that this place felt just like the abode of fairies, one of the species of which she is in the world of Dungeon and Stone. While scouting the surroundings, the elf noticed traps everywhere, although the barbarian was unable to notice their presence. So the girl decided to show their location and threw a stone straight into the trap, causing it to go off. Unlike the previous floor, here they were camouflaged. After that, Erwin started begging for praise, but Björn decided not to overdo it and simply said that she was throwing stones well. However, seeing the girl's displeasure, he still added that there was no need to rejoice over such trifles, and that he already considered her to be a fairly experienced adventurer, and she was pleased with this. After walking around a bit more, the girl expressed concern that there were enough traps, but there were no people who set them, and the hero remembered that their presence in this location was more of a feature of the zone. In the game, this place was also called the Goblin Forest, and in addition to the traps, there should also be many times more goblins here, and among them there should now be mutants, archers, and warriors, and the deeper, the more and more dangerous. Björn ordered to first deal with the traps in the area and then explore further, so that in case of danger, it would be possible to run to the portal without fear of getting a leg injury. After that, the couple simply searched for traps and disarmed them to secure their escape route. But they had to stop abruptly, because Erwin noticed traces of a group of goblins nearby, which she did not hesitate to tell Björn about, and also soon clarified that there were more than 10 of them, and they were about 50 meters away. The hero decided that the threat should be eliminated, so he ordered to get as close to them as possible and attack while they were unknown. The girl walked quietly and silently, and the barbarian decided that this was some kind of fairy trait. But be that as it may, a group of monsters was soon discovered. The pair decided to start the fight with Erwin's shot, so soon the sound of a bowstring being pulled was heard, and they prepared for battle. The arrow shot forward, and a moment later, the barbarian shot too, not even sure whether his companion had hit due to the distance. The boy and the goblins ran towards each other. Erwin, as an archer, stayed behind and did not rush forward. Both sides were confident of their victory. The second floor is different from the first. There are 3 times more enemies, and you can also encounter new species, and most likely the hero should have felt fear. But the barbarian did not feel it. On the contrary, the warrior's heart, which he received in his new life, trembled in anticipation of the battle. With a loud battle cry, the hero burst into the crowd of greenskins and began to scatter them in different directions. But there were too many enemies, and one of them almost cut off the barbarian's head with his dagger, but he was fast enough to dodge. And Björn jumped back, thinking about the situation, because if he had been a little less agile, his head would have flown off his shoulders. The enemy has the advantage in numbers, and injuries would be inevitable if he were here alone, but it's good that he has an ally. To prevent the goblins from running to Erwin, the hero began to shout loudly, attracting the attention of the green-skinned shorties. It was time to finish. From defeating the group of goblins, 11 magic crystals were obtained, which was quite good compared to the first floor. After all, Björn earned about 44 in a whole day, and although he wanted to take the armor or weapons, they dissolve along with their bodies. The barbarian decided to give Erwin 2 crystals because those that fell from the goblin warriors were more valuable, which made the girl happy. After which he ordered them to move on, because he was impatient to see the results of the whole day's monster hunt. As the pair went 3 kilometers into the floor, groups of goblins began to appear every 5 minutes. This time they had a new type of enemy with them, a goblin archer, whose specialty, among other things, was camouflage, with the help of which he could disappear right before your eyes. The barbarian and the greenskins rushed towards each other, because even though the shooter would make things more difficult, he would not lose. While the battle was going on, the archer took an advantageous position in the bushes and began to aim at the hero, and now the right moment for the shot arrived. But thanks to the excellent reaction of the new body, the guy managed to notice the arrow flying straight to the target. At the last moment, Björn was able to dodge the dangerous projectile without receiving any injuries, after which he began to search for the shooter's location. The goblin realized his mistake too late and could no longer hide, so he was killed with one powerful blow of the hammer. After 15 hours of continuous fighting, both were very tired, so they finally decided to rest. This time Björn was the first to take up duty, because despite the fact that they were very well prepared, the elf could not boast of the barbarian's endurance. It seems that it has already become a tradition to reflect on duty, and this time the hero did not break it. They hunted for 15 hours and earned more than they could have dreamed of on the first floor. But the further they went, the more often they encountered other adventurers, who not only often had numerical superiority, but also included different races. Adventurers are much more dangerous than goblins, especially now that the guy has someone to worry about. Björn said out loud his thoughts that the biggest problem was that he was very beautiful, which embarrassed, in fact, only the girl who was falling asleep. In the following days, the couple actively hunted goblins to earn crystals and gain experience. Together they rested from physical activities and protected each other's sleep from monsters and other possible dangers. So the 6th day of their stay in the labyrinth passed, and the 7th came. The couple decided to get out of here because there were only 2.5 hours left before the first floor closed. They were both very tired these days, but it affected Irwin especially strongly. She already dreamed of going to bed immediately after returning. Soon they came across a group of goblins on their way, and despite their fatigue, the adventurers decided to fight their opponents. The mere sight of the stern barbarian already instilled in the green-skinned monsters a feeling of insecurity in their own strength. While scattering the enemies, Björn decided to deal with the warriors first, and Erwin would deal with the archers. After so many battles during these days, the hero became a master of such battles and gained enough experience. And Erwin also didn't stand still and now always knows exactly who and when to shoot so as not to interfere with the guy. Although there were 2 archers among the goblins, not a single arrow flew towards the barbarian, and the enemies were already defeated. The pair had already worked together perfectly. The time it took to kill goblins had been significantly reduced, and looking at Erwin and noticing how much she had grown in recent times, Björn even began to feel proud of her. Suddenly, among the evaporating corpses and magic crystals, the elf noticed something unusual, something they had never seen before. It was an essence, part of the dungeon and stone skill system. It gives passive or active skills. You can only absorb 1 per level. Skills vary greatly depending on who dropped the item. For example, the guy who chased the couple downstairs most likely had the essence of a razor wolf, which enhanced his sense of smell. When asked if the elf wanted to take the essence for herself, she answered positively, since he didn't need it anyway. But then, suddenly, a group of aggressively minded adventurers emerged from behind the trees onto the recent battlefield and began to accuse the couple of something. Erwin tried to justify herself, but Björn took her by the shoulders and told her to stop, because he had already guessed why they were here and what they wanted. After which, he simply threw the girl's light body into the essence that rose into the air, because that was exactly what these people had come for. A bright light flashed and blinded the adventurers, who realized what had happened and were extremely outraged that the valuable prey had slipped out of their hands. Björn Yandel decided to try to intimidate the adventurers by making a brutal face and saying that he was ready to fight right now. After some time, the couple was already running through the forest towards the portal to the first floor. The guy ordered his companion not to slow down until the portal itself. The 4 adventurers still did not risk encountering them, but Erwin asked if they would pursue them, to which she received the answer that they were hanging around near the portal, which meant they were going to leave this place. And also, there are only 4 of them. They have the same tactics as their couple, to which Erwin praised the guy's intelligence. Soon the girl reported that there was a group of goblins ahead, and they were running straight towards them. Björn realized that he would not be able to simply get around them. This was suspicious, because goblins usually don't behave like this, and they didn't want to run into them now, when the pair's goal was the portal, so the barbarian ordered to change direction. But before the girl could answer, a projectile flew towards her, and Björn pulled her out of the way by the collar. Rubbing her injured neck, Erwin noted that she herself would have dodged the goblin's arrow, to which the hero responded that it was a crossbow bolt, which meant it was those adventurers. Most likely, it was they who lured the greenskins, and they themselves are sitting in ambush on the other side, wanting to exhaust them. Björn decided that there was no other way out. They would have to fight, but they had an advantage, the power of the essence. The goblin archer's essence, based on game knowledge, should increase stats and give 1 passive and 1 active skill. The first is arrow poisoning, and the second is camouflage. When Erwin remarked that she didn't know how to use them, Björn pointed out that she was already using them, and it seemed to be done simply by the power of thought. The hero handed over the backpack and sleeping bag to his companion and said that he would deal with the goblins himself, and her task was to find the enemy crossbowmen. When asked about the danger of separation, the guy replied that they didn't have time. She needed to keep her head down and shoot her target after the signal. And he rushed at full speed towards the goblins, no longer hearing the question coming from behind him about what kind of signal this would be. The hero decided that if those adventurers did not show up after the shot, they would show up when he defeated the greenskins and entered the fight. There were more than 10 of them. 2 of them were warriors. It was more difficult to fight without support. There were no archers in sight. But suddenly one of the shooters showed himself by shooting at the shield, which means you also need to watch the arrows. Taking advantage of the hero's distraction, one of the goblins snuck up behind him and plunged a dagger into his body. Without Erwin's help, alone against a group of enemies, needing to watch out for goblin arrows and not forgetting about the crossbowmen, the situation is extremely lousy. More and more wounds appeared on the warrior's body, although none of them were serious, but there were more and more of them. A crossbowman suddenly intervened in the battle. At that moment, 2 projectiles, an arrow and a bolt flew at Bjorn. Both could not be blocked, and there was no way to dodge. The hero decided to defend himself from a more powerful crossbow shot, and he will have to take the goblin gift on his body. The arrow pierced right into the elbow, and it also turned out to be poisoned. Now one arm is not working, which means I will have to choose what to throw. The hero decided to leave the shield, because although it would be easier to kill goblins with a hammer, the real threat comes from the crossbowmen, and without a shield it will not be possible to defend against a bolt. The battle with the greenskins became even more ferocious and difficult, but despite the advantage they had gained, the monsters could not win. Very soon there were only a few goblins left, and they decided to run away. This man had instilled fear in their little hearts. As soon as the battle was over, how did the adventurers who had been watching the hero's battle all this time show themselves? The crossbowman was not with them, the barbarian noticed, and their leader began to ask about Erwin's whereabouts. But the hero was not going to answer and simply said to attack. There was nothing else left anyway, because he was not going to give up. The adventurer gave a speech about how, although the barbarians had a lot of energy, this representative of theirs already had enough wounds, and now they would defeat him and find out where the elf had gone. Finally, the leader said to imagine that they were fighting a huge monster. The group rushed towards the hero. Choosing a unique gesture for this world, suitable for giving a signal, the guy decided to raise his hand higher and put out his middle finger. Seeing the suspicious movements, the adventurers became wary and stopped, and the hero wondered whether Erwin had understood the signal. But in any case, it doesn't depend on him, and all that remains is to trust his companion, thought Bjorn, making a dash towards the enemy. He met his onslaught and blocked the blow, but realizing that he would not be able to compete in strength with the barbarian for long, he called his comrade for help. An elderly man with a katana named Elias intervened. He drove the hero away with a blow from which he had to move away and break the force contact. But despite the less than ideal situation, Bjorn could not retreat, because in order to help Erwin, the enemies needed to be distracted, so the son of Yandel entered the battle against the 3. But everyone had to turn away from the battle because some kind of projectile was flying towards them, and no one knew whether it would be a crossbowman's bolt or an elf's arrow. The above-mentioned projectile would have hit one of the adventurers, if not for the shieldman, from which it was concluded that it was Erwin. The warrior with the shield shouted to his comrades to focus on the barbarian, and he himself would protect them from the arrows, and the hero realized that this was his original plan, and that was why he almost did not interfere in the battle. And since you can no longer count on help from Erwin, it's enough that she practically took one of the 3 enemies out of the battle. You need to win yourself. But despite the barbarian's strength, the battle was not in his favor. His opponents were noticeably stronger, more skilled, and more cunning than some goblins. The hero decided that in order to win, he would have to sacrifice something, and perhaps by exposing his non-working hand to the blow, he would be able to incapacitate the red-haired leader of the squad. He succeeded. Elias's blow failed to penetrate deeply into the barbarian's muscles, but the guy's target received a powerful blow to the face from the shield. Taking advantage of the moment of vulnerability after the blow, the older man attempted to cut the hero in half with a downward swing of his katana, but Bjorn was able to dodge. Elias was extremely surprised that such a mass of muscles could move so quickly, although he seemed like a clumsy brute, and froze in surprise. Erwin tried to take advantage of this, but the shield man covered his comrade and urged him to be more attentive and not get distracted. But this arrow turned out to be a trick. The elf was counting on the warrior taking the shot, because this arrow carried fire magic, and now the wooden means of protection would soon burn out. Erwin's next attack pierced the shoulder of his opponent, who was now unable to hide behind his shield, while Bjorn was thinking about how extremely skilled his archer was. The situation on the battlefield changed dramatically, and now the scales tipped in favor of the hero, although victory was still far away, because the red-haired man was already recovering from the blow to the face. The adventurer decided to deal with the elf first, and the barbarian could not stop him, so he only believed in his companion. The fight continued, and in an instant Elias opened himself up for a strike, which Bjorn couldn't help but take advantage of and tried to strike. But the elderly warrior managed to dodge, but the barbarian saw an opportunity in the fact that a former shield wielder was running behind the warrior with a katana who could no longer boast such dexterity, and the blow landed right on his skull. Now they were left alone. The other driver was unlikely to get up. Bjorn was thinking about the fact that Elias was very strong, and it was unclear how he ended up on this team. They fought each other. In this battle, the fury and strength of the barbarian met with the dexterity and technique of the swordsman, and no one gained the upper hand. They were worth each other, although they were almost complete opposites. But it is worth noting that all this time, the elderly warrior practically did not attack, but only dodged, because he was stalling for time and waiting for the return of his red-haired comrade, which Bjorn could not allow. The hero came up with a trick. He pretended to hit, but in fact threw the shield straight at the enemy's head, which he did not expect and was unable to dodge. The barbarian's primal rage took over Bjorn's entire being, and he bit off a piece of Elias's throat with his teeth, thereby condemning him to a very painful death. Soon the rest were finished off, and while the hero was recovering from the feelings that overwhelmed him, Erwin approached, who, apparently, dealt with the red-haired one. Noticing Bjorn's condition, she gave him a healing potion and advised him to drink it, since it was more effective, and besides, he was also poisoned. The hero felt like his insides were boiling, all his veins were hurting badly, and his skin was burning and itching, but the wounds were healing, and that was the main thing. Bjorn asked about the time, and after receiving the answer, the guy realized that there were 40 minutes left before the first floor closed, which meant there was no time to rest. The hero ordered Erwin to take everything off. She was embarrassed, but obeyed, to which the barbarian clarified that he meant to take all the loot from the enemies. But he soon realized that there was no time for this, so he said to take only equipment, magic crystals, and backpacks. By the time they finished sorting through the trophies and ran to the portal, there were only 50 seconds left before the first floor closed. After the transition, the hero landed unsuccessfully again, but Erwin showed her agility, and she also said that it was fun. Bjorn wanted to meet and talk with his companion on the other side, but he couldn't get the name of the tavern out of his memories of the game, and there was less and less time left. And only in the last seconds he remembered that it was the Black Whale, about which he hastened to inform his friend before they were transported. And finally, after going through many dangerous situations, the hero finally returned to the city, to Raffonia. Although it was expected, since all the adventurers appeared here at that moment, Bjorn was still surprised by their number. In the labyrinth, time does not pass like in the city. No matter how much time you spend there, you still return at noon the next day, so the hero immediately moved the hands of his pocket watch to the correct position. Making his way through the crowd, one of the barbarian comrades, Karak, son of Vannon, hurried towards Bjorn and shouted his name along the way. Soon the rest of the relatives began to gather nearby, and the one who found the hero was very popular in their circle. The entire disorganized crowd of savages headed out of the square, and Bjorn decided not to lag behind and not stand out from the group. Soon all the barbarians began to take turns exchanging magic crystals of various values for money, while simultaneously finding out who had managed to earn more. The woman behind the counter worked extremely quickly and professionally. Her vast experience was clearly visible. It turned out that the hero had earned significantly more than the others. The amount was over 180,000, which was significantly better than the others, in connection with which the relatives began to congratulate one of their own. The barbarian did not hesitate and accepted the praise, and also raised his hammer and shouted that he really was the best warrior. Others also noticed that he returned with better equipment, which only added to the joy. The savages began to throw Björn up in the air and chant his name, but the workers of the establishment did not like this noise, so they were soon calmed down. Soon the group of barbarians left the building and sat on the stone steps, waiting for everyone to receive their money, and the hero decided that he would follow the others, because he did not yet know the local layout. While examining the city, Jandel's son noticed a small detachment of elves, and among them he managed to discern Erwin. The girl also noticed her friend and waved awkwardly to him. Björn also greeted his friend and quietly asked to meet tonight, and despite the distance, the sharp ears heard everything. But the attentive elven eyes of one of the group of adventurers noticed the couple exchanging glances, so the attentive person asked if Erwin knew this barbarian. But only the pointy-eared can boast of excellent vision, so Karak also noticed what was happening and asked Bjorn about his acquaintance with this girl. Both began to deny the connection between themselves. As soon as the two groups turned their attention to each other, it became possible to notice with the naked eye the enmity between the two peoples. The tension grew. The last barbarians left the establishment just in time, and Björn hurried his relatives to leave, since in such a situation it would not be possible to have a normal conversation with Erwin anyway. Walking through the streets of Raffonia, the hero noticed touching reunions of relatives who had returned from the labyrinth. But also everywhere there were grieving people who were unlucky enough to lose loved ones on this day. They cried, blamed themselves or others for what happened. Many did not wait for their parents, children, brothers and sisters, and loved ones that day. The hero had already seen all of this in the game Dungeon and Stone many times, but looking at all of this in reality, and not in a 2D picture, caused completely different emotions. But be that as it may, life went on. So soon the barbarians reached the tavern, where they began to celebrate their successful return with the spoils. Björn didn't like all this because he followed them because he thought he might accidentally miss some necessary step, and not for this reason. Therefore, he decided to leave without even trying the drink, and some of his relatives decided to see off the most successful warrior. Walking through the streets of the city, Björn's tension gradually eased because there were no monsters or hostile adventurers here, so there was no need to fear attacks, and he could finally relax a little. The hero became interested in the clothes shop. He wanted to buy himself a clean shirt, but his things needed to be cleaned of blood and other dirt. Lost in his thoughts, Björn didn't even notice how he had reached a quite decent hotel. His head was occupied with thoughts about the serious differences between the two worlds. Having paid for the room, the guy went to the shower to finally wash properly after so many days in the labyrinth, and also thought that living in this city might not be so bad. But lying in bed, the hero admitted that he was deceiving himself, and had done the same thing before, because in fact he wanted to go home, even though no one was waiting for him there, and with these heavy thoughts, he fell asleep. Björn woke up already at night and decided that now was the time to go meet Erwin, so he started getting ready. Having asked a local resident about the Black Whale Tavern, the hero received the answer that this place had had a different name for 10 years already. Finally, Björn became convinced that the game world was lagging behind this in time, and having learned about the current name of the tavern, he went there. Nowadays it was called Python's Paths, and the hero noticed that he could read the local language because he understood what was written on the sign, which meant that he should visit the library soon, but now he needed to go inside. The tavern had a good atmosphere, there were many customers, and finding Erwin here would certainly not be an easy task. But the hero was lucky. The girl was the first to notice and call the guy, but there was another elf sitting next to her. He had seen her during the day. She was clearly in a negative mood, and when asked who she was, the answer was that the pointy-eared one was Erwin's older sister. When the guy asked if she had a name, He answered Tessia, which was part of his girlfriend's full name, from which it was concluded that she simply did not want to introduce herself normally. The hero asked why she was here, to which the girl flared up and said that it was because the barbarian invited such a young elf to such a tavern. And she continued that the meeting was scheduled for last night, but the guy never showed up. He's just an insensitive barbarian. The hero was surprised why it was last night, and Tessia thought that he was just making a fool of himself. Björn decided to make sure, so he asked Erwin how many hours had passed since leaving the labyrinth and received the answer 30 hours. The hero thought that only 4 had passed, but it turns out that he had slept for more than a day, which made him feel guilty. Jandel's son decided to apologize and explained the situation he found himself in. He didn't think it would turn out like this. Erwin's elder sister was shocked. She couldn't even keep her face. It seemed like she had never seen barbarians apologize. After this, Tessia asked about the reason for the meeting, but the hero did not want to talk in front of her, so he said that she could find out everything from her sister after the meeting. Further dialogue did not take place. Sparks seemed to fly between the two of them, and Erwin was torn, trying to calm her friend and relative. During the argument, Tessia suddenly slammed down a heavy bag and said that these 350,000 magic stones were payment for the essence. Björn began to explain that he would like to continue hunting in the labyrinth with Erwin, and she could earn the necessary amount with him, and they would divide the spoils in half. At first the girl was happy about this, but a moment later she became gloomy and refused, and the hero could not understand the reason because they made a good team. Tessia explained that now Erwin would be on the same team with her, and before that he was alone, due to the tradition that the first entrance to the labyrinth should be solo. The hero realized that now his girlfriend had people who would take care of her and decided to take the money, but noticed that based on the agreement he had made with his girlfriend about dividing the spoils 1 to 9, there was still 280,000 missing. To this Tessia responded with a bag she had prepared in advance, and Björn realized that she was simply trying to trick him, but he kept it all to himself and asked her to leave, because he still wanted to talk about something with his friend. But she didn't want to leave her little sister here and was about to start objecting when Erwin herself intervened. She really appreciates her sister's concern and is glad that she came here with her, but she needs to thank Björn and say goodbye to him. Tessia agreed, but only on the condition that the barbarian swear that he would not sleep with Erwin, which embarrassed her sister. Björn calmly swore an oath on his military honor, because he didn't give a damn about it anyway, just like he didn't give a damn about the oath itself in principle. Tessia was satisfied with this and was already heading for the exit, but halfway there she turned around and thanked the hero for saving Erwin's life. Left alone, the friend said that she had never contradicted her sister before and asked if she would be angry about this. The hero calmed Erwin down because Tessia didn't look angry when she left and even thanked him with a smile. The girl tried to apologize for having already decided to be on a team with her sister, but Björn stopped her, and also thought that he himself would not have refused if a high-level elf had invited him. After that, Erwin handed the hero a bag with the red-haired man's and the crossbowman's magic crystals, and she had already taken her share. She also left the rest of the equipment in her house, and tomorrow they should sort it out and decide what to do with it. Erwin said that she wanted to somehow thank Björn for saving her, and he realized that this was precisely why Tessia had demanded an oath, but nothing had come to his mind yet, and the guy suggested ordering something. The girl's eyes lit up, and she said that she had deliberately not drunk anything yesterday so that she could share her first return drink with the hero. It is a special drinking tradition that involves having something to drink upon returning from the labyrinth, and for young elves it is quite important. Erwin was a little worried that this wouldn't be Bjorn's first return drink, but the hero said that this would actually be his first as well. The girl was very surprised by this, to which the hero replied that he had already said that he was only 20, and she thought it was a joke. Soon the table was covered with all sorts of dishes, because Björn had slept all day and was terribly hungry. The couple spent their time culturally drinking the first return drink, and it didn't take long before the table was almost down. Björn decided it was time to take a break, and announced that he had come up with a way for Erwin to repay him for saving him. The elf decided that she already guessed what the guy would ask for, so she suggested going to his room. But what awaited her was not at all what she thought. The barbarian decided to check how the essence affected the girl's characteristics. And in real life, an increase in the flexibility parameter by +4 is not particularly noticeable, the hero thought, watching the elf check her hand. Erwin asked if he really thought she came to the room to check her stats, to which the guy replied that you can't check your skills in the city, and some people were clearly disappointed with this development. Although the game dungeon in stone had only 3 main characteristics, these are strength, spirit, and abilities, but each of them had hundreds of other parameters. The guy spent thousands of hours studying them, but still couldn't understand the effects of some parameters. Looking closely at Erwin, the hero thought that the goblin essence should have increased her obsession parameter, and he didn't know what it was doing. When asked whether she had felt any obsessive thoughts or lack of restraint, the girl replied that she suddenly really wanted cookies, although she had never liked them before. The hero concluded that this characteristic strengthens desires, and in the future some other unknown effects may appear, but his thoughts were interrupted by Erwin, who said that she wanted to lie down. Soon Björn woke up and thought about the oath he had made to Tessia not to sleep with her sister. And then I decided that it didn't matter, because you meant a completely different dream, and I continued sleeping. The next morning, the pair decided to sort out the equipment of the dead adventurers. Erwin asked if the barbarian was going to sell everything, to which he agreed, but specified that he would leave a couple of things. The elf then asked if she could keep the leather suit and belt, to which she was granted, but it would be deducted from her share. After this, the couple began to go to various shops and stores, and in order to sell all their loot, they had to go around a lot of places. The total came to 1,450,000 stones, but taking into account the equipment, 50,000 is Erwin's share, which does not change the impressiveness of the remaining amount. This would be a great start, Björn thought, since even in the game he hadn't managed to get that much on his first outing. When the girl heard that it was time for them to say goodbye, she was upset, because she wanted to spend more time with the guy, and to console her a little, the barbarian suggested that they go to the central square together, since they were on the same path. Upon arrival, the couple noticed that a crowd of onlookers had gathered in the square, and a guillotine had been erected in the center. When the girl asked what was going on, the guy replied that it looked like the execution was beginning, while looking at the condemned man. There were other unfortunates nearby, whose only guilt was non-payment of taxes. People have no other choice, because the rest of the world was destroyed by the witch's curse, and only here, thanks to the labyrinth, there are resources. But they are limited, and in such a cruel way one has to control the number of hungry mouths, the hero thought, watching the locals dip bread in blood and eat it. When the girl asked about the reason for their actions, the guy explained that there is a belief that the blood of the executed brings financial luck, and then asked about the amount of crystals for the first year's tax. To which I received the answer that the amount is 700,000 for non-humans, but in the second year it is already 800,000, and a commission appears upon exchange, which is slightly different from the game, but close. Taxes are growing every year, which means he can't stop training, otherwise his blood will end up on someone else's bread. You need to save up as much money as possible so you don't have to worry about it, so you need to get to at least the 6th floor in order to avoid execution and survive. After saying goodbye to Erwin, the hero went to the library, where he continued to collect surprised glances from other visitors, since barbarians are rare guests in such a place. Walking through the reading rooms, the hero suddenly noticed a familiar girl. It was Einar, the second or third daughter of someone there, he didn't remember, who seemed to have fallen asleep right on the book. Björn decided to wake up the blonde, because he was curious what she was doing there. She woke up easily. The girl was glad to see her son Jandel, which she announced very loudly to all the visitors of the library. When asked to be quieter, she justified herself by saying that she did not expect to see a fellow barbarian in this place. The hero asked about the reason for her stay here, to which the girl replied that she decided to follow his advice to think before doing something, so she decided to gain new knowledge here. She also said that while in the labyrinth, she realized that it was not only monsters that posed a danger, so Einar decided to study, but she faced a problem, which was her poor reading skills, and now she is going to the Temple of the Barbarians to fix it. As she was about to leave, the girl remembered her promise to repay for the advice, so she said that she should be looked for in the Angry Bull Tavern. The library was simply huge, and the hero couldn't even imagine how to find the books he needed here. Björn decided to approach the female librarian, but noticed that she had fallen asleep at her workplace, so he tried to wake her up with a soft cough. She immediately opened her eyes and began to find out what was required of her, to which she heard about the need to help in the search for books. But before the hero could explain the details, the librarian cast some kind of spell and cast some kind of effect on the barbarian. And yawning, she explained that he would find the book he needed if he simply wandered around. Taking them with him was forbidden. He had to read them in the library. Before Björn could find out exactly how it worked, the girl closed her eyes and fell asleep again. He quickly understood how magic works. Just looking around a little, it turned out that magic simply highlights the desired book, which was very convenient. Now it became clear to the hero why only one person looks after such a large library. Magic makes life much easier. The first book Bjorn picked up was called The Fallen World, and it told the story of how the lands had been cursed for thousands of years, and only Raffonia survived, thanks to the ruling family who opened the way to a dimension called the Labyrinth. The second, Basic Notes on Alchemy 4, covered ways to turn magic crystals into food, water, steel, and other resources. The book Holy War 3 described the reasons for the enmity between the barbarians and the elves, but he was already impatient to touch the fourth, the most useful for him. Bearing the name Evil Spirits of the Abyss, which was the name given to those who came from another dimension to take over someone else's body. The reasons are not described here, but it is clear that the ruling family and the church have done a lot to get rid of this phenomenon. For him, as an evil spirit, the information from the book was very useful. As long as he didn't give himself away in any way, he would be fine. The fifth book on the death of the king told of the death of the first ruler, who was called the Immortal, Ravigian III, and he died 150 years ago, and it is from this event that the events of the game begin. Next, records of dimensional instability, which suggested that he himself was to blame for ending up in the dark region, as interference in teleportation could cause passage through a closing portal, which is what he did. Those events could have been entirely his fault, but even thinking about it was disgusting to the hero, and so, while reading books, night approached. Lying in bed, Björn thought about the fact that 3 days had already passed since returning from the labyrinth, and there were still 27 days left until its next opening. Tomorrow he would look for companions, and with his thoughts, he fell asleep. In the morning, the hero was awakened by a knock on the door and Erwin's voice calling him to wake up. The guy had no choice but to obey and go open the door. Before Björn could say hello, a powerful gust of wind hit him in the face, causing him to lose his train of thought. Erwin began to happily tell that she managed to make a contract with a new spirit. This time it was the wind element, although she spent 10 spirit stones. Showing a creature that looked like a small tornado, she continued to say that she was very lucky because the elements of fire and air go well together. The hero remembered that spirit stones are a rather expensive item, which allows you to make a contract with a spirit, a 10% chance. After finishing his thoughts, Björn asked to call the creature back, as a strong wind was currently causing a disturbance in his room. As an apology, Erwin decided to confirm her words about her good cleaning skills, and the barbarian admitted that she really did it very quickly and efficiently. After this, the hero asked the girl about the reason for the visit, because she has more important things to do, for example, preparing for the trip to the labyrinth. Erwin explained that she wanted him to be the first to know about her successes. Based on these words, Björn decided that he was her first friend, or something like that. The barbarian said that he would live here for a long time, so if the girl had problems, she could come, and he himself thought that they could very well remain friends, despite the fact that they would be on different teams. Erwin, sitting on the bed, beamed at these words, and the hero thought that having many connections is always useful. Having said goodbye to the girl, the hero went to the Angry Bull Tavern, where the barbarians were staying. One of the relatives told them all sorts of things as they walked through the establishment, in particular that they lived 10 people in a room of 5, but paid only 300 crystals. Soon they met the one for whom Jandel's son had come here. It was Einar, Feneline's second daughter. When asked why he needed her, the hero explained that he wanted to fight her for training. In response to this request, Einar explained that there was no point in spending her debt on this. She could just go to the site, and she was not against training in her free time. Björn didn't want to put this matter off for later, so he suggested that the girl fight right now. It didn't take Einar long to defeat the guy. It was just a crushing defeat. She was very good, which meant he would not waste his time in vain, so the hero was not going to limit himself to one duel and demanded another. The fights continued one after another. Einar emerged victorious from each one, but Bjorn was not upset. Because she was very strong, the main thing was that he learned. The moon had already risen in the sky and both fighters were tired, so they decided to finish training. Looking at the girl, the hero found her very strong, smarter than the other barbarians, and she was also unlikely to betray him. Björn decided to find out if Einar had a team, to which he received the answer that she was going to go alone, because she did not have the money to assemble a group. Having learned the information he was interested in, the hero decided that the best choice would be to invite the girl to join him. And he began to explain the conditions under which he would take 80% of the spoils for himself, but would pay for the creation of the team himself. But in the middle of the speech, Einar interrupted Björn and said that, not a word more. She looked determined. The hero tried to explain the benefits, to convince. But this was unnecessary. The girl meant by her words that she agreed without any words, since she wouldn't understand anything anyway, and simply trusted him. This brought a smile to Björn's face. He was glad that he finally had a reliable teammate. The next day they went to the Temple of the Barbarians, where the hero had recently begun his journey. There they were met by the same man who had conducted their ceremony back then. Björn had no desire to return here, but there was no choice. The man recognized them and asked the hero if he was following in Einar's footsteps in wanting to learn to read and write, to which he received a negative answer. When asked why he was here then, Björn replied that he wanted to obtain a certain spiritual seal, or more precisely, the seal of the immortal. The non-human races have different features. For example, elves can make contracts with spirits to borrow their power. Dwarves can also gain the blessing of armor, which increases the effectiveness of their equipment. Beastmen have the ability to form contracts with ancient beasts, called spirit beasts, and the barbarian race has the ability to apply a spiritual seal in the form of a tattoo on the skin of the back. The man began to question the source of information from which Björn learned about this method of amplification. But the hero had thought this point through. He had checked in advance whether this information was available in the library, so he replied that he had read it in a book. The man laughed at this and patted the boy on the back, and also said that he was proud of him and Einar. The chief noted that he had no reason to refuse, but the cost of this service was 800,000 stones. To the rhetorical question of whether the newcomer could handle such a sum, the hero answered in the affirmative, which surprised both his companion and the man opposite him. The chief became serious and asked where the young warrior got so much money. It was very suspicious. But the hero thought this through too and began to talk about how he was lucky to meet a wounded elf in the labyrinth. He used her as a slave and took away the magic crystals he obtained, and also gave her essence. And upon returning from the labyrinth, the guy forced her sister to pay for the provided item. With his story, the hero greatly pleased both the leader and the barbarians who gathered around to listen to his story. As a gift for his good mood, the man gave Björn 2 coins worth 100,000 stones each. The hero shouted that he would continue to bully these useless elves in order to become a cool warrior, and the more he looked at his new relatives, the more he became imbued with their spirit. Spiritual seal is a kind of strengthening technique, the purpose of which is to fill the body with special ingredients that will give special strength. Barbarians tattoo newly born children when their souls are still pure, so that the paths of the soul are visible even after they grow up. So every one of his kind has tattoos. The shaman gave the young warrior a chance to think better, because he would not be able to choose another spiritual seal, but would remain with this one until the end. The seal of the immortal is the main requirement for a tank barbarian. Other seals are also very useful, but the hero has already made his decision. Getting the tattoo was excruciatingly painful, and Björn was already shuddering at the thought of having to go through that again in the future to level it up. Its effect was a significant increase in natural regeneration and physical characteristics. At parting, the guy thanked the shaman, which surprised the latter because for the first time he saw a warrior who thanks people like him. At this news, Björn hurried away as quickly as possible, hoping that his unusual behavior would not reveal his nature. The next morning, the hero went to the shopping district to buy the necessary equipment, thinking along the way that thanks to training with Einar, it became clear that the sword would not suit him. Björn plans to focus on learning shield techniques, so the weapon should be easy to handle. The hero's choice fell on a medium-sized mace, the cost of which is 220,000 magic stones. The barbarian also took half armor for 360,000 and a custom helmet, since he couldn't fit into the usual ones, for 170,000. After that, time flew by. Although the days were full of worries, they very quickly became routine. At 7 in the morning, he woke up and had breakfast with Erwin. After that, Björn stayed in the library until 4 in the evening, which greatly surprised other visitors, and the librarian slept constantly. After this, the guy goes to different taverns to listen to the conversations of other adventurers. He does this in order to obtain information that cannot be found in books. After this, around 5, Björn goes to the barbarians to fight with various relatives, with whom he began to fight a week later. After regular training, the hero even began to defeat Einar sometimes, and his efforts began to bear fruit. He succeeds in this because the girl, although strong and skilled, has direct and predictable movements. He told her this, but it has long become her habit, which she is unlikely to easily correct. At 9, Björn returns home, washes up and meets Erwin again to have dinner with her. They finish around 11, after which the elf leaves, but this time she reminded them that the labyrinth opens again tomorrow. The month has passed extremely quickly. The next day, Björn and Einar went to the Explorers Guild to establish a magical connection. Its price for rank 9 seekers is 15,000, and it works for 24 hours, but it is necessary so that after teleportation, you end up next to each other, and not in random places. The hero decided to order an expensive dinner, a whole feast for 800 stones before entering the labyrinth, which made his partner happy. Having finished with the last things to do, the couple headed towards the square, where the rest of the researchers were already waiting for the portal to open. Suddenly, a group of barbarians burst in here. They were newcomers who had just come from the coming-of-age ceremony. Their appearance brought a pleasant nostalgia to Einar, even though only a month had passed since she had been in their place, and Björn thought about how they managed to find their way every time in an unfamiliar city. Soon, it was possible to enter the portal, but the hero stopped his companion and said that he wanted to check one of his guesses. The portal became smaller and smaller. Einar began to worry, but Björn was still waiting for the right moment. And so, when the security guard at the entrance shouted that it would soon close, the guy rushed forward and shouted for the girl to do the same. The next moment, the hero's guess was confirmed. They found themselves in the dark region, as he thought. To his companion's concern about what was happening, Björn explained where they were and said that this time he had torches, and the last reservation surprised the girl a little. Right in front of them was a passage to the second floor, and thoughts flashed through the hero's head that every gamer should know how to use bugs to their advantage. Without delay, the portal was opened, and the first person to do so also received some experience as a reward. This time the location was different, the dark ground, The remains of stone structures and heartbreaking screams indicated that this was the land of the dead. But unfamiliar feelings distracted Björn from examining the area. He felt as if something was moving through his veins and filling his body. The barbarian shared this with his companion, to which she replied that according to the description, it looked like an increase in the level of the soul, that is, an increase in the level of the character, as it was in the game. He now has more energy to use skills and can also have two essences. Einar congratulated the hero on this, but noticed something strange because he did not kill the monsters, and the hero told about the reward for opening the portal first. In this world, experience can only be gained the first time you kill a certain type or subtype of monster, so the further you go, the harder it is to level up. Opening the portal first is a stable and relatively easy way to earn EXP, so many people try to get to the transition as quickly as possible. Björn told Einar that this would be their secret, and if anyone asked, it took them 2 days to get here. Sooner or later other explorers will get here, so you need to get away, because they will wonder how the newcomers got here faster than them. The hero tied a torch to his helmet, and the steel did not heat up due to its magical nature. Although this method has long been used by adventurers, the guy still felt a little ashamed. The land of the dead contains various types of strong, undead-type monsters, unlike the goblin forest. But there are no traps here, so it's a bit easier, in other words, an ideal place for two barbarians. The first enemies the team encountered along the way turned out to be a trio of ghouls, but this is only because it is only the first day. On the third, their number will triple. These enemies did not pose any threat, so they served only as a light warm-up for Einar, and the hunt began. After some time, a terrible scream was heard nearby, and the companion, although a barbarian, was also a lefty, so she pressed herself against the guy in fear and asked what it was. Bjorn explained that these were banshees, and they should not attack these monsters, because their physical attacks would not damage the ghost's body, and the curse could easily be obtained. The next monsters that appeared on the barbarian's path were skeletons, on which Einar could just vent her fear. Björn tried to advise the girl that monsters had a vulnerable core between their ribs, but it soon became clear that she didn't need that. She could just smash the bones with brute force. They walked through the lands of the dead for another 7 hours, and encountered various monsters, such as elder ghouls that were twice the size of normal ones, or mutants that turned into skeleton warriors and skeleton archers, and all the new species brought the desired experience. They did not pose a danger, both because of their small numbers, and because of the hero's increased combat capabilities. The mace was perfect for the guy in terms of weight and length, so it breaks the skulls of enemies much more effectively than with a hammer. The vest-style armor reduces the area that needs to be covered by the shield, allowing for more aggressive fighting. And the new helmet, although it won't protect against any crossbow, can easily deal with the rotten bows of skeletons. The hero has become better at destroying the enemy, but there is also someone nearby who is no worse at this. She went into battle with the battle cry of Yahello, the name of the goddess of the barbarians' ancestors, and having tried to shout as well, Bjorn did not notice how this cry began to fly off his tongue extremely easily. It was a refreshing feeling. Compared to fighting with Erwin, having a fellow barbarian's shoulder next to him felt completely different. During the fight, Björn received a small wound on his arm, but it closed very quickly, causing delight in Einar. The seal of the immortal improves natural regeneration. Healing a wound half a centimeter deep takes only a minute, and stamina is restored faster, although the pain is terrible. Soon the earth became dry, the soil changed, and the banshee's cry became much louder. All this meant only one thing: monsters of the 8th rank would appear soon. And he didn't keep us waiting long. It was the demon of death, who somehow miraculously managed to quietly approach the couple almost right next to each other. The monster looked more terrible than Bjorn had imagined, but fear did not stop the barbarians, and they rushed into battle. Einar attacked first, and while the monster blocked the blow, the hero slipped past and found himself behind the enemy. But the maneuver was useless, because the creature's body was so hard that the blow felt as if it were a stone and not the flesh of a living creature. Despite the lack of visible damage, the demon still tried to kill the impudent barbarian, but the latter was fast enough to dodge. But we shouldn't forget about Einar, who decided to take advantage of the monster's distraction and struck the creature with her huge sword. But the weapon was unable to enter the monster's body, and the young warrior was thrown further away by the attack. The death demon in the game had high defense, but the guy didn't think that in reality it would be such a difficult opponent, and even small scratches on it healed extremely quickly due to the body preservation skill. But soon, the situation worsened even more because the monster used its active skill for summoning ghouls, which was called the Call of Death. Björn ordered Einar to deal with the dead first, while he would distract the monster. Weaker attacks could be easily taken on the shield, especially with the physical stats boost from the Seal of the Immortal.